How many of y'all are Go developers here? Oh, that's great. That's good. And how many are Rust developers? Nice. Amazing. I just hope by the end of this talk, there are no fights here. But if you are here in search of a deep technical talk about Go and Rust, then I think you should probably join the others to the beach. Because today, we are going to hear a story. You are going to hear a story of an ancient land, and we are going to listen about two kingdoms from these ancient lands. The land of Servernia is what we are going to learn about, and we are going to see how the two kingdoms in this land, live, and what are the best things that they both are at, and a lot of other things. So Savernia has two kingdoms, Golangia and Rastonia. Does do these kingdoms ring any bells for anyone? Like, no? What might the people of Golangia be doing for work, or what the people from Rastonia might be doing for work? Well, let's see more. So now both these kingdoms have two kings which have been arch nemesis for a long time. They basically hate each other and they're always fighting. There's King Rastav and there's King Goris. King Goris is known to be a very simple man. King Goris is known to be straightforward, and all the applications that the people of Golangia build are known to have great deployment setups. So that's what King Goris is known for, to be very simple in implementation, to be very simple in learning the rules and regulations of that kingdom. Whereas King Rastav is not that easy to deal with, or King Rastav isn't someone who will be very easy to catch up with. But King Rastav is known for his control over his kingdom, the people of the kingdom, and he does this using his manager. And the name of the manager, can anybody guess the name of the manager of King Rastav? The manager's name is Cargo. So King Rastav's manager is Cargo. I hope by now you must have guessed what King Rastav works for or stands for and King Goddess stands for. Can anybody guess? Oh my God, is this that difficult? Rust and Go. So I have just added AV and ACE. So King Rastav comes from Rastonia, which is the land of rust, and King Goris comes from Golangia, which is the land of Go. Getting into the serious stuff, so Go and Rust have been known for a very long time to be like the communities as well as the languages are always put against each other in terms of performance or which one is better, which one is not. While they really don't need to be against each other. It's all about which language suits the use case better. That's the whole goal of both these languages. Now, while both these languages are great at doing what they do, wouldn't it be amazing if you could use applications and things that you're using in Go in your Rust code, or vice versa, if you could use Go features and the best parts of Go in your Rust code. Yeah, vice versa also. This currently is not very straightforward when it comes to the existing architecture or existing solutions available for communicating two languages. Let's take an example of how things are happening in a simple Rust code. So what you're seeing in front of me, in front of you, is a basic Rust API, which is doing nothing but taking a string and returning back a string. That's all. Now, what you have to do is imagine a more complex library in case of this simple API, and You have to imagine this whole use case in terms of how things would look like for a complex library. Now, this API that you have in Rust, how would you use in Go? Can anybody give me some ideas about how we would use this in Go if you wanted to use this API from Rust? Any, any guesses or any idea about which we could do? So the normal understanding around any communication that happens between two different languages is done with a concept known as FFI. Has anyone heard of FFI? Perfect. That makes things harder for me. I was hoping people didn't know. But FFI stands for Foreign Function Interface, which basically in simple language means it acts like a bridge between two languages and helps you communicate between these two languages. So, coming back to our kingdom of Golangia and Rustonia, for years and years, any communication that was happening between these two kingdoms was happening via an ancient queen, Syra. Now, Syra has way more experience than King Rastav or King Gorus. She is basically the one from whom they have both taken inspiration from and have developed their rules, regulations, and developed their whole empire based on Syra. I hope by now you've guessed Queen Syra stands for which community and which kingdom. Can anybody tell me? C, yes. I started my career with C, and I guess a lot of y'all have started your careers with C also. Coming back to the main point is any communication that happens between Go and Rust happens via C directives and using the C API layer in between. Now, there are two ways of how you would be doing this. And we are first going to see how you would do it on a manual level. What you see in front of me is currently a Rust code, but it's basically open to, it's a C API which makes it open to communicate with any language that can accept C code. So there are again two functions in this code. The first function is again a send greeting function, which is nothing but it takes in again a string. It checks if the string is empty or if it's not empty. And then what it does, it converts the string into a C format. It takes a string which is a Rust string and it converts it into a C string. That's the first function. The second function that you're seeing is a free string function. What this function is doing is basically freeing all the memory that is being allocated during the execution of the function and during the time that the code needs that particular variable or that particular function. Now, taking back to the concepts that we heard, that C and Go, both these languages have different ways of memory management. Both of them handle memory management in a different way. That's why it's important that it's handled in the middle layer when it comes and talks to C. So we saw a C API right now here, and before that, we saw a Rust API. Now let's see what happens in the world of Golangia, what happens on the Go side. Now again, we are talking about the same function. We are talking about the same thing that's happening either on the Rust side or the Go side. Now in Go, you would basically have again the C string, which is coming from another function, which was the C API layer that we spoke about. We're getting a C string from there. We first checking if we are sending it to the function that we want to send. And next, we are again freeing the memory that has been allocated after it is not needed anymore. And once once the function call happens, you again return the string in the Go format, because if it's a Go function, you need the string to be in Go format. So if you notice, the thing to look at is the c.go string, which is again converting your C string into Go string. And in the previous thing, we had c.c string where you were checking for the string, C string. So what did we do here until now? We started with writing a very simple Rust library. We exposed a C API in Rust. Wherever needed, at whatever steps needed, we freed the memory. We wrote functions for it, because as we spoke, we want to make sure that memory allocation is done properly. And because in C this is not automated, we have to manually manage memory. And we wrote the similar function that we saw in Rust in Go that contained the bindings. Now, what I mean by bindings is basically this whole setup of making sure that it's available to your C API and it can converse between Rust and Go is what we did manually over here. It's going to take some time to go ahead. Yeah. So yeah, that's what we have achieved till now. All of this was manual. Like, on a small scale tool, this makes sense, where you write small code on your Go side, on your Rust side, and you have a C interface in middle where the communication is happening. Now imagine this on a bigger perspective, where you have a Rust library and you need to use that in your Go code. You want to use your Rust functions or your Rust components in your Go code. This is not very easy when you're trying to do it manually. Now, there are some existing ways of doing it. You could, if you've heard of WASM, WASM does provide you some options of like using the WASM bindgen macros. If you want to get into more depths of it, do read about it. It's pretty cool how it works. But again, it's not seamless. It's again a lot of manual work, and it does not work for every use case. So this is where the UniFFI tool comes into picture. Specifically for Rust, this tool has been built. It has been built by Mozilla. Mozilla was the first one to build this. They have an amazing architectural document that you should read if you want to learn more about how to use Rust components. This UniFFI tool supports a lot of languages like Python. It supports Swift, if I'm not wrong, and it also supports JavaScript, which is one of the major use cases for UniFFI tool. So yeah, it's built by Mozilla. The whole goal of the UniFFI tool is that you write your core logic in Rust once, and you can reuse it in different frameworks. And as we mentioned, the reason this tool exists is so that there is automation of foreign function interfacing between two different languages, and you don't have to write manual bindings for all of them. Now, the cool thing is it uses a file type which is known as UDL. It stands for Universal Definition Language. Has anyone heard of UDL before? This is the most interesting part for me, because it makes things easy on a third-person level. It adds in a lot of abstraction for people who do not care about what's happening on the behind it. Oops. So it's gonna take its sweet own time to write down the whole code. But a UDL file is nothing but a file that will clearly mention the definition of a function, which will be similar across any language. So as we saw initially, we had a send greeting function, which was just taking a string and it was returning back a string. So a UDL document would basically tell you that you need to pass a string and you will be returning back a string. And if there are any more function signatures included, that will be a part of the UDL document. There will be nothing else in the UDL document which will be specific to a language, which will make it a Rust document, or which will make it a Go document or a JavaScript document. So the whole concept and the logic of using UniFFI in making sure that you can use your Rust code in any other language sits in this single line, which is UniFFI generates scaffolding, and you share the UDL file into it, the address for the UDL file. Now, what UniFFI generates scaffolding does is it automates the whole process of creating bindings for you based on the UDL file that you've given. The code for how UniFFI's generates scaffolding works is something that we're not going to get into. It's very similar to what we did in the manual process, but it basically automates all of it and only lets you have a couple of files, which are first your Rust code, which is the component, the library that you want, the Go side of the library where you want to use the library, and the UDL file. That's it. That's all you need. You don't have to write the C API layer, which we initially wrote when we were talking about the manual process of doing things. There was some animation, I guess, on my keynote which hasn't been picked up. Interesting. Yes. So I guess we already discussed what UDL means. It's a definition which helps you converse between any two languages. Yeah. It tells you how data should be structured. It is the file that the scaffolding will pick up to understand, okay, these are the functions that I need to generate bindings for on both the sides. Yeah. The point to note about if you want to understand UDL in a single line, it's nothing but a blueprint that any language can understand and pick up. That's all UDL is. You don't have to get into more depths of UDL. Okay. This is how a UDL file looks like. I am just going to remove the animation on it because I was not sure there was an animation on it. Okay. Okay. Oops. Just a minute. Oops, I think it's gonna play on its own. But yeah, the basic understanding of a UDL file should be clear from the last 5 minutes that we've spoken about UDL. Let me just go ahead and take it to the next slide. Yeah. There's some issue with the... Yeah. So if you see, one last time, we have the namespace, which is how you define a UDL file. You have the name of the function, and you have the major method that you want to be defined. And that's all about understanding how UniFFI works in general and how it is different compared to the manual way of making things work. So tying it back to having Go and Rust, what UniFFI basically did is build a bridge between these two languages. It helped us communicate between Rust and Go. But the catch here is that UniFFI, the specific tool UniFFI, does not support Go. As of now, you can use it for creating bindings for JavaScript, Python, Swift, and all of that, but it does not support Go. And that's where UniFFI Go bind gen generator comes into picture. It was then developed by Nord Security. I'm pretty sure everyone has heard of Nord Security, but they realized that they needed a use case where they wanted to use the Rust components in their Go code, and that's where they created this package named as UniFFI Go bindings generator. Now, if you want to use this generator, it needs to be in sync with the UniFFI tool, which is developed by Mozilla, although it's a completely separate project from UniFFI.rs. And the process for writing a code in UniFFI using the tool is very similar to the existing tool. You create the UDL file, you create the Rust library based on the UDL definition, you generate the Go bindings using the UniFFI bindgen Go command line tool, and you write the Go code to use the bindings. And finally, you compile and run. So the command line that you see below is the single line that you need to enter in terms to get your scaffoldings, get your bindings generated in the code. And that will basically give you the complete code for having the automated part of the bindings. And getting a quick recap of how the tool is compared to the manual bindings, you have the foreign function interface, which is nothing but a bridge between two languages. Then we saw the steps for manual bindings between Go and Rust. We saw how you write the code in Rust, we saw how you write a C API, and then we saw how you write the same thing on the Go part. Finally, we saw what is UniFFI, and we saw what is UDL. We also saw what UniFFI bindgen Go is and how it is different from UniFFI.rs. That is what supports Rust and other languages like JavaScript, whereas UniFFI bindgen Go specifically supports any kind of communication between Rust and Go. And finally, we saw a basic structure about how the bindgen Go code looks like. In terms of what you need to pick up after this talk is some GitHub links for the main UniFFI repository, the repository for bindgen Go, and the code example that I have written to explain how things work on an automated level. There is also another link for the manual one on my repository, so do check it out if you want to compare it side by side. And yeah, that's mostly about the UniFFI tool and how things would be on a manual level based compared to on an automated level. Finally, talking a little bit about SarielDB. This is the company that I work for. It's a multi-model database. It's a query. It has its own query language, which is known as SarielQL. It has inbuilt full text and vector search, and you can even run ML models near the database. It does support graph, relational, document, and in-memory features, and it's ACID compliant. So anyone who's interested to learn more about SarielDB, do let me know, and let's have a conversation around it. And yeah, finally, a little bit about me, what you already heard. I like making kombuchas. I am a backend developer, and I'm a developer advocate at SarielDB. And that's all for today's talk. Thank you so much.
Okie dokie.